students in the Department of Chicana, Chicano, Latina, and Latino Studies. And both master's and graduate students, as well as undergraduate students. We're really excited today to have a very special Maria Baeza, which you'll hear all about from our host, Erandi.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erandi Colin, and my pronouns are she, her, ella. And I am a student in the Chicana O and Latina O Studies Department at Cal State LA. And I'd like to welcome you all to our fourth virtual webinar of the Grito series. The word Grito is an acronym for Getting Revolutionary and Intersectional Testimonials Out. We are extremely excited to be in the presence of a phenomenal activist and Chicana O movement trailblazer and organizer. We will begin today's webinar with an archival testimonial interview presentation, and we'll stop at 1 for a Q&A session. Please feel free to type questions in the Q&A section below or raise your hand using the Zoom feature during the Q&A time interval. At the end, we'll have a survey that will help us improve future events. Your participation is much appreciated. Before we begin, we'd like to take a moment to establish our claim and commitment to land rematriation. In this space, we acknowledge that the land we inhabit today was once known as Tovangar. It is the home of the Gabrielino and Tongva people, the stewards of this land before we came to live here. Many Gabrielino and Tongva people continue to live in the Los Angeles area and care for this land. In addition to the Gabrielino Tongva people, there are thousands of indigenous people living in Los Angeles from across our nation. This history of what happened to the Gabrielino and Tongva in this land and other indigenous peoples in the world is one that has been hidden and distorted over the course of time. This has been done in part and in an effort to erase the immoral and unjust actions of Europeans and Americans who stole and colonized indigenous lands. At Cal State LA, we seek to tell the whole story and include voices that were previously excluded. We strive to bravely face the facts of this history, no matter how painful, and give a truthful account of the past. I hope that beginning with this acknowledgement will lead to a better understanding of our world and will lead to meaningful actions and contributions in our society. Specifically, I believe that sovereign rights of Native communities in the Los Angeles area and throughout the world need to be strengthened and preserved. And now I would like to hand it over to our my co-host, Dalia Carmona.
Hello, everyone. I am Dalia Carmona, and my pronouns are she, hers, ella, and I am also a student in the Chicana O and Latina O Studies Department at Cal State LA. Today's special guest has made fundamental contributions to the field of Chicana OX studies and ethnic studies as we know them. In the wake of the civil rights movement, a wave of Chicana OX youth mobilized across the country, and from the masses arose some of our history's most important leaders who have transformed our present through activism in the face of hatred, racism, bigotry, heterosexism, patriarchy, ableism, and xenophobia. Our honored guest today was once the vice president of UMass at Cal State LA during the late 60s and pushed for the development of a Department of Mexican American Studies at the university level. Her efforts led to the first Department of Mexican Americans in this country. Folks, I present to you our revolutionary mother, Maria Baeza. Thank you, Maria Baeza. Thank you for being here and for giving us your time. We would like to start off by asking you, where are you from? Can you give us street names or school names so that the audience can know and be situated. And maybe some of them are even from the same parts that you were.
Thank you. But before I do that, I do want to thank you all for this very special invitation. I'm very honored that you reached out to me. There were a number of places that we lived in East LA. When we first came to Los Angeles, I lived on Michigan and State Street. Then I moved on to Inez Street and Chicago, and then we moved on to 4th and Matthews, and then I moved to Pico Rivera because my parents, through very hard work, after many years, were able to buy a little house in Pico Rivera. So it was from Pico Rivera that I commuted to East LA Junior Community College and then Cal State LA. So I think you know where what my barrio was. Pretty big.
Yes, thank you. Just a little comment for those attending. If you press the live captions on the bottom toolbar, you all will be able to see captions popping up on your screen. So that's just a little comment that we forgot to mention earlier. So I'm going to start off with another question. In a previous interview with Dr. Covarrubias, you mentioned that your mother was born in the US, but was subsequently deported during the repatriations of the 1930s at the age of 10. Do you recall any of your mother's testimonials of these events and how she experienced them?
And yes, actually, my grandparents were very young. They were campesinos in Mexico. And my grandfather's name was Doroteo, which you see there. Then you see my grandmother. They were very young. She was 17 and he was 16. She was an older woman and came across Texas. He quickly got a job in the railroad and then traveled with the railroad across the Southwest and finally settled in a little town outside of Montebello, which is called Simmons at the time. It was absorbed by Monterrey. Now my grandfather and my grandmother, by the time they went back to Mexico, they already had 6 children. And my grandfather, who worked in a brick factory, which, by the way, there's in Montebello today, there is a museum where you can go see that particular brick factory. But he saw the writing on the wall. By 1929, there was a lot of push. Mexicans were seen as one of the factors that were responsible for the economic depression. Nothing new there, is there? So my grandfather, seeing the writing on the wall, he had a truck, he packed his few belongings, went down to Arizona where he worked some in the fields. The kids also worked, and then down to El Paso, made it across El Juarez. My mother and her siblings had never been to Mexico, but they were in Mexico now, and the Mexican government acknowledged all these people that were coming back from the United States, and many of them were given some land to work so that they could earn a living. And that's my family and story of, coming to this country, my grandfather and my grandmother living here, and then going back with 6 children.
How did the repatriation affect the way your mother viewed the US?
Well, I think for her, it was a very difficult uprooting. My mother had never been to Mexico. She had been to school here. She was 10 years old. So she really thought she was American and didn't understand why they were going back to Mexico, a land she had never seen. But subsequent to that, she also had to adapt to Mexico. She had to, learn the Spanish that was spoken in school. So there was an adjustment there, but she never forgot where she came from. This is the reverse of me, She never forgot that she had lived in Simmons, that she had a life here. When she got married and she had us, and we came back to Los Angeles, she was quite at home. Whereas I was 10 years old, and I did think about Mexico and my life there. And also I had to learn English. So it was the opposite. My mother had one experience going back to Mexico, and I had another experience coming to the US.
What was it like for you moving here at the age of 10?
It was difficult because economically we were not well off. We had to make sure that every dollar, every quarter, every penny was well spent. We knew exactly how much we had for groceries. We knew exactly that we got the quart of milk, that we got the pound of meat, so forth and so on. So it was a difficult adjustment. Also, for my brother, it was more difficult because there was always the bullying, wet back, go back, and that was difficult. The other thing is that I had gone to school in Mexico, up to the 4th grade. And so when we went to be registered for grammar school, the nuns changed my name right away. My name is Maria Lourdes Baeza. They said, well, now you're going to be Mary because you have to become American. And my brother's name was Jesus Arturo. And they said, well, you have to be Jesse now because we're asking you, you came here, you must assimilate. And that was very hard too. We have a change of name.
Did you fight for your name to be Maria, or did you just take Mary?
I just took Mary, and I didn't fight it, but my father did. My father was very upset, and he said, no, you are not going to be Mary in this house. You always will be Maria Lourdes. And I had a nickname, Luli. So it was Luli y Arturo. We were not really encouraged to speak English at home at all. It was all Spanish, Spanish radio, Spanish newspapers, Spanish books, because my father believed that we were being instructed in English, and that was the instruction, but education we got at home. There's a real distinction that Mexican parents made at the time. If you were educado, that means you had social graces and you had social awareness. But if you were instruido, that means you were getting ahead in school, being instructed in languages and math and history. And that's the way my father thought, at the time. And that was an important lesson, because I always thought that history is an integral part of everyone. It makes you who you are. And I really believe my father was very responsible for that.
I think now it's different. I feel like a lot of jobs and a lot of people in the workforce, they want you to be bilingual. They want you to have that both English and Spanish. So it's definitely very different from what you experienced and from what your mother experienced as well. Earlier, you were discussing about your family's migration story. How did you begin discussing this with your family?
Oh, I was always curious. Also, we had, and my mother had a sister who also was born in the United States, who who came to live in Los Angeles. Usually migration of immigrants tend to move into areas that are familiar to other immigrants. In other words, they're the first ones that come and settle. In my family, there was a sister of my mother's sister who came and settled in El Sereno. So when my mother came, then we settled in East LA. Then another of my mother's brother came and he settled in El Sereno. Then another one came and, so eventually all 7 brothers and sisters came back from Mexico and they all settled around Montebello, Sereno, and Los East LA. So there was a lot of discussion about, oh, ¿ya arregló los papeles? ¿Ya tiene la documentación? ¿Cuándo viene? Y cuando viene, ¿dónde va a llegar? ¿Y quién le va a ayudar a rentar una casa? ¿Y qué tenemos para darle? ¿Hay muebles? ¿Hay ollas? ¿Qué hay para darle a este nuevo inmigrante? Y sí, talking about immigration was a constant theme. Also, because a couple of my uncles who were born in Mexico were working as braceros. They worked in the fields, but they had to go back to Mexico because they were only temporary field workers. So my world of immigration was seen from a number of different perspectives.
Did you ever meet other folks whose parents were repatriated to Mexico?
My mother and her family settled in a small, almost village outside of Chihuahua, which was called La Concordia. And there, my mother knew of several families who had come to Mexico, excuse me, at the same time. Did I meet anybody? No, but I knew of people who at my grammar school, I knew of people who were in school for those 9.5 years and 9.5 months, and then would go back to Mexico. Or they would go to work in the fields. That's another thing. I had friends who were in school with me, but as soon as summer came, they went to Fresno to pick the crops that were available there. Sometimes strawberries, sometimes lettuce, and all those.
Thank you for sharing that. We'll be moving on to your ELAC years, right? And more specifically, MASA. Can you tell us about your involvement in MASA at ELAC? And how did you become the secretary of MASA?
Well, actually, when I got out of high school, this is so typical. When I got out of high school, I knew how to type and how to take shorthand and all this. So obviously I was going to go be a secretary, but I wasn't very happy with that future. So I started taking a couple of evening classes at East LA, and I finally decided that I would be a full-time student. And so in becoming a full-time student, I had to figure out how I was going to help my family. So I started working and on a part-time basis, and I met other students and who coincidentally we took the same history class with Dr. Miller, and she was a historian, a Mexican historian, and really enjoyed Mexican history. So she wanted to know about us, who were we? What did we want? What were we there? So she would ask these very important questions that made us think, never from a point of making a judgment. So I think at one point she said, why don't you guys get together and organize yourselves? There's so many young kids in school that would benefit. So we did. We got together, about 10 people. There were two older students that had been in the military. His name, one of them was Carlos Hunter. The other one was Juarez, his last name. And then another woman and I, Virginia Gonzalez. And so we started organizing. But we did not only organize our little group, we also organized as to what could we do in the community. That idea that we had to be in the community, work in the community. We started a tutoring program, and I happened to choose my program at Lincoln High School. So, and then others went to Garfield, and so we divided up. Our group wasn't that big, and we were called Mexican American Student Association. And you know, we recognize each other on campus, and we try to recruit other students to this organization. And we did. We were successful. And I think one of the reasons, there were two main forces that helped us. One was the Vietnam War, and the other one was the presence of the organization of the United Farm Workers. You know, so we could see that many of the people that we went to school with, high school, were you know, in Vietnam, and also that we that there was a consciousness, a process that was being witnessed by us through the farm workers. So I think we began to take conscious of the idea that we needed to give back to the community, that we could, you know, we were only freshmen at East LA, but that we had a role to play. And that we were Mexican. This is another thing. I mean, that we weren't calling ourselves Americans of Mexican descent, you know, that we were calling ourselves Mexican American, and we weren't hyphenated. So that was very important to this group of people.
How many Mexican American students were at ELAC during this time?
You know, I cannot tell you. I have not gone back to look at, I'm afraid. I knew a lot of them because we used to sit together at lunch in the cafeteria, this long table, and we would, you know, exchange jokes. We would exchange, you know, what we were doing or assignments or whatever. And so I really concentrated on the people that were in MASA, but also there were other people that I interacted with in class that I tried to recruit to MASA.
Earlier you mentioned Dr. Miller. How did she help students organize?
Well, you know, like I said, she asked very probing questions, but her questions made us think. And her class also, in her class, she also talked about Mexican Revolution and what people in Mexico were able to accomplish through their efforts, through revolution. So I think that without even knowing or being really conscious of that, we understood that we could also contribute in this way. But also, not only did she give us information about Mexico and that, but also I remember very clearly she brought a Los New York Times article that had a cover on it, and it said, "The Giant Awakes." And they were reporting on a number of activities that were taking place in Texas, Nuevo Mexico, Colorado, and California with the United Farm Workers. So somebody, I don't remember who the author was, thought that there was a relationship of all these different groups that were getting together to reinvent, to ask for and demand many of the things that were enjoyed by the majority population, like housing, health, education. And oh, there she is.
Yes, thank you for sharing. We're going to be moving on to your Causterele years and specifically your years with UMAS. Can you tell us how you became a member of UMAS and how was your experience like being the vice president of UMAS?
Well, when we came on campus, we already had a not to call it a history, but a little bit of experience in the community. So what we wanted to do was to continue with that. We didn't want to leave our on the one hand, the experience we had in setting up the tutorial program, but so we wanted to continue with that. So, as you get into an organization and you say, okay, what's happening here? Who's doing what? What's their purpose? Well, we understood the purpose. We wanted to advance Mexican Americans in the community. And so we wanted to know, to make sure that majority population also and community also knew who we were, because there was a lack of information about Mexican Americans or Mexicanos. There were very strong stereotypes that influence policies and behavior of the power structure towards Mexicanos. So we wanted to also be known for what we did and understand that we had something to do with defining who we were. When we first got on campus, like I said, I joined UMAS because it was an easy. I had come from MASA. We had already, we had I think Monte Perez and Phil Castrita had come on campus, and they had told us that their group was UMAS and it was called United Mexican American Students. So we should unite with them instead of, carrying our own organization and having 10 people here and 20 there. So we said, wonderful, that's a good idea. So we joined forces, and I became very active in setting up different, I had the experience of going to the different schools to figure out how we could identify students who needed tutoring. At the same time, I got a job along with another student, Oscar Martinez, who was part of UMAS, and we got a job going into the schools. It was part of the War on Poverty program. And we got a job going into the high schools to talk to teachers and counselors about increasing the enrollment of high school students into the college. And that was an incredible experience because it really, gave me an insight, or gave Oscar and myself an insight into what was the high schools like. I had not gone to a public high school. I'd gone to Sacred Heart of Jesus. So I wasn't really well acquainted, but going and speaking with the counselors and the teachers who obviously had their own biases. Oh no, we have very few of our students are eligible. Then we would say, well, can we follow it up? We would follow up with parents. We would go to the parents' house and say, hey, we heard that your daughter or son is college material. What would it take for this person to apply? We have a program called Equal Opportunity Program, and we would explain. And so from that experience, we organized a day on campus for students to come on campus, high school students to come on campus, and go through the EOP process and have a number of students talk to them and see that, they were not that different from us, that we had been where they were. And so that was a very exciting time. At the same time, what was happening on campus, we had the El Teatro Campesino with Luis Valdez come. And that was a very important turning point, because I think that many of the Mexican students, or what we now call Chicano students, had not really tuned into UMAS. But out of that experience, we were able to accommodate, to seek out other students who became interested in our efforts and what we were trying to do. And then, I'm sorry I'm going on, but you asked. And what was also very important is that we began to take note of the fact that we knew our community, we knew who we were, but we didn't know the history of our community. We did not know the history of our people. And no wonder many people couldn't identify. They didn't know our history. So we began to look at that. And coincidentally, a professor by the name of Ralph Guzman came on campus. And he began to talk about several national organizations that I had not heard of before. So as a political science major, I was really interested in the whole notion of organization, mutual assistance societies, which was, what they were practiced and made it easy for the integration of many immigrants, not the assimilation, but integration. So, he also had a lot of experience in other areas. So there was a group of us that began to work with him just to get to know him better and find out what he knew about possibilities of starting some courses at Cal State LA.
So in some of the archives at Cal State LA, we found university papers and articles referring to events that UMAS had organized to recruit and promote the university to Mexican Americans in this community, as how you've been mentioning before. In some of these events, there were figures like Reyes Lopez Tijerina, Mr. Sal Castro, Rodolfo Corqui Gonzalez, and even musical artist Lalo Guerrero. Do you recall organizing these events, and what were some of the details you might remember about these events?
Oh yes, absolutely, because there was not only were we interested in attracting the potential students to Cal State LA, we sat in the middle of this, East LA, this huge Mexican community. And there were, I don't remember, I think that what we knew, there was 100 students. And maybe there were 200, and maybe we didn't know the rest. But we knew that there was 100 students that we could identify as being Mexican American. So we wanted the community to also feel that Cal State was theirs as well. You know what I mean? That we belong there. So when we brought Lalo Guerrero, I was the mistress of ceremonies, the mistress, the woman. Anyway, I remember, Lalo Guerrero was very well known in the community. And so in introducing him, I said to him, this is an old person. Es un amigo viejo de la comunidad. When he comes back, he says, no estoy tan viejo. He reminded me that he wasn't that old. And so I had to apologize to him for calling him viejo. But anyway, and we had other musicians come. Yes, we did have Corky Gonzalez. And, but I can say more about that. I personally loved his poem, I Am Joaquin. I thought it was, but then with time, I lost my enthusiasm for his more wider philosophy, especially in regards to women.
Yes, we have a section regarding gender and Chicana feminism, which we'll be going into, but I have a couple of other questions regarding your Causarela years. In the archives, we also found many documents and newspapers that discussed UMAS and BSU coming together and organizing. Do you have any recognition of UMAS and BSU and collaboration with each other?
Yes, I belong to a committee, the committee that brought together the Black Student Union representatives and UMAS representatives. Our task was to, number one, agree amongst ourselves about a process by which we would get the university to recognize the need for Black studies and Chicano studies. Okay, so that was a process. And what we wanted, what was at odds maybe was the timetable. We wanted to do a more thorough. We had less, I think part of the problem here was that as Mexican American studies, there was very little background on what was available to be taught from that perspective. Whereas the Black studies group had much more advanced. The history of Black education in this country is reinforced by their colleges, by the fact that they already had formed a whole group of intellectuals. And we were, in the process of developing our intellectuals. And not only that, but one of the things that our group was also involved with was with identifying who would be available. And, so we went about a very systematic search for Mexican Americans in higher education, whether it was in literature, sociology, political science, and so our schedule of proceeding towards Chicano studies was a little behind the Black Student Union. And to be honest with you, we, at least personally, I felt that we had a very, we negotiated well. But there were a lot of the Black students who, because of the circumstances, they were way ahead of us in some respects and not in others. So what we started out with the idea of perhaps having the more core courses. And then eventually we worked towards wanting to have a full program. But that happened after I left. With after I had very good relationships, with the Black Student Union. I was very friendly, blah, blah, blah. But I understood where we were in our development.
When you were VP of UMass and a secretary of MASA, do you recall any instances where there may have been an altercation between student organizations and the police department?
Well, on campus, I was thinking, I think you've asked me a similar question before, and I believe during the Vietnam War, some recruiters, Army recruiters would come on campus, and we did not welcome them. To be honest, the disproportionate number of Mexican Americans dying in Vietnam in comparison to the majority was incredible. I mean, they were being sent. So we didn't feel that we should welcome them. And there was an occasion in which the recruiters were run out of. There was another occasion in which recruiters from a chemical company came to recruit. This was the same company that produced the chemicals, the orange, that were being distributed or flown into Vietnam. And we didn't think that should happen. So there were several instances in which we took a stand. And in one occasion, I think it was the police did come on campus and there were skirmishes, but I didn't participate in the one with a corporation. The other one with the recruiters, yes, we stood there with our signs.
Thank you. We're going to be moving on towards your ideas or thoughts on gender and Chicana feminism. So I'm going to start off by asking you, are there other individuals, specifically women, who you believe had not had the leadership recognition they deserve during the Chicano movement?
Wow, that's a big question. In the Chicano movement as a whole,
or maybe students that you had the chance to organize with that you believe deserve to have that recognition as student organizers?
Well, I think well, from Cal State LA, you basically have identified most of at least my cohort group. I mean, Marilena Gutierrez, Vicky, Gloria Arellanes, there were all these people that were there. But, at the same time, there were women that we, as UMass at Cal State LA and UMass at UCLA, there was a couple of women that I think stood out. One of them was Susan Rocha. I don't know if you have ever heard of her, Susan Rocha. Then there was, I forget their names, but they were very, very active in UCLA's Mecha. And I'm sorry, I don't remember their real names.
No worries. Now that you mentioned Maria Elena Gutierrez, do you recall the role of Maria Elena within the organizing?
Oh, yes. Well, she was very central to the helping us understand the process by which she worked for a period in the administration, so she understood very well the process of equal opportunity programs, budgets, because she worked with a provost, budgets, and also she knew who was who because of correspondence. But she also developed her own, her own very strong personality within the organization. So I remember her as a very powerful person within the organization. There was another woman, Lilian Roybal. Lilian Roybal, her father was Eduardo Roybal, who was a congressman for many years and represented East LA. I want to tell you about Lilian because I had a very beautiful experience talking about Ralph Guzman. Ralph had been invited to go into the Fresno Valley to one of the high schools. And he invited Lilian and myself to go talk about UMA's student organizations. And we went up with him to Fresno. And we talked to the students, and we told them what we did, what we studied, how we got interested in why our student organizations were important, and what they could do. Unbeknownst to us, these students that were asked to come to the auditorium were separated from the Anglo students. And the Anglo students were not asked to come to our talk, only the Mexican students. And the Mexican students were not happy. They felt they were being discriminated against, and our message got lost in the struggle, let's say, or misunderstanding, or whatever it was, but our message was lost, and for that we were very sorry. But on the other hand, Professor Guzman also took us into La Esperanza, where Cesar Chavez was on a hunger strike. And I want to tell you that I came away from that experience even more reinforced in the idea that we had to struggle for social justice. And that really convinced me that we had to work very hard to advance social justice, equal opportunity, and women's rights for some reason. Because I think that experience with the high school students opened my eyes as to how people are manipulated, and even in that very small little medium, people are manipulated. And in this case, we were manipulated at only talking to these Mexican students, which we wanted to, but not at the price of keeping, others out or making the students themselves feel discriminated against.
I wanted to ask you, how do you think your gender affected your activism?
Well, I think it did. We've talked about this. The other day, I was talking about how my father was very encouraging in terms of my studies, in terms of my working, in terms of my being active. He had no problem with that. But, in retrospect, and I think my father was okay with all of that, but he didn't want me to be sexually active or even have a boyfriend. You know, every time I brought somebody home, like I would bring somebody home to study, Albert Juarez was one of them. He would just like, no, is this the guy that's gonna, you know, take my daughter away? All that came back to me. The other thing is that there was always this feeling, I guess, among some of the women in the group that some of our guys that were in the same group were always like on the make, you know, who could they, not because they were serious, but because they wanted to, you know, we were influenced by what was happening outside. And what was happening outside, we had, you know, the what we came to call the hippie movement, you know, free love, but all of that. But I think some of the guys thought that their machismo or whatever was involved in, you know, forming temporary relationships with women. What they wanted was to take them to bed, you know? And I think once I began to think about what that was like at the time, I think I began to understand a lot of things, to realize in retrospect. On the other hand, you know, I did not have a problem being a vice president or secretary, nothing. It was something that I had developed along being in grammar school and high school. That was not a concern, but I think there was a difference. Women, young students, the students were seen different. Was this a beautiful woman? Was this somebody that you could use as an object? Is this somebody who you want on your, you know, to be arm in arm with? Are you going to be proud of this woman, or you know, all of those things that really played into our relationships, very subtly, but they were there.
What was it like to come of age as a woman during the Chicano movement?
For me, you know, I guess I was so, I had blinders on. I mean, I knew I had to finish at East LA. I knew that I had to go to Cal State LA, get jobs. I finally got a job that I liked, and that was being a bank teller at the Bank of America. So I knew what my hours were, so I could work my classes around that, and my UMAS activities around there. I didn't have much of a social life, to be honest with you. It was work, study, and my activities on campus. My weekends were dedicated to catching up, you know. So I can't tell you that I had a wonderful social life. I don't think I did. I found that many times I was, at first, I was not taken seriously because I was Mexican. You could tell I was Mexican. You know, I had an accent when I spoke English. I still do, but you know, you knew. And I felt that sometimes I was not taken as serious about my studies, about who, about my comments in class, especially when I talked about Mexicans, you know, and Mexican history. There was not validated as much as someone else who was talking about that experience. But that didn't stop me from talking about it.
In terms of ethnicity, how do you identify today?
Well, that's really interesting because I live in this community, as I said before, where it is a very multi-ethnic community, where we have people from all Latin American countries, especially from Venezuela, Colombia, Chile, Argentina. We have a large population of Brazilians. We have, of course, I said Cuba from the Caribe. And our Mexican population here is not as big as it is elsewhere. And most of our Mexican population are probably work in the fields still. Now there's been a somewhat of a change because some of the crops that used to be grown here are now grown in Mexico, like tomatoes and other items. But here we have the growth of nurseries, flowers and all of that. And a lot of our people work in nurseries, which is good because they're stable. They're not, migrating into other parts of the US. So that's good. A lot of our young people are still dropping out, not as high as they used to. We have a number of professionals that are taking over, but this community is essentially a bilingual community. Many of our Mexican students have to learn Spanish, have to speak Spanish because it's such a vibrant bilingual community. And there are a number of schools that offer bilingualism as a regular course. So when people ask me, what are you? And I know that I am in a group of other Latinos, I say I'm Mexican. If I'm in Homestead, where I deal a great deal with first and second generation Mexican, I said, I'm Mexican. But because the word Chicano is not, it's used among people my age, but not among the young people. There is no conciencia, of Chicano history. There's a lot of conciencia of Mexican music, but not as much about Mexican history, and sometimes you hear somebody say, es un pocho, and that irks me, and then I stop and say, well, what do you mean by that? And because that's a term that is used to derogatory. It's a derogatory term, at least from my point of view. So I live in a community that I contribute to it by working very hard on the issues that are important to me, like sexual violence, domestic violence, and equal opportunity for education, and also for food security, because there's a lot of food insecurity here. There are a lot of poor people.
Thank you so much for sharing. I know we're a little short on time, so I'm going to end off my questions, right? So is there any final remarks or any messages that you would like to give the attendees and the youth?
Yes, let me tell you, I think that what has helped me along the way in organizations, I have always been true to myself. I know who I am. I present myself as who I am, an immigrant, a person who has reached higher education, and which doesn't make me any better or worse than other people. I'm just there to help others and encourage others. And the other thing is that I think it's so important to look beyond, to really come and open your analysis as wide as possible, to look around and see what's happening beyond your little world. Like what is happening in this country. I'm very concerned about the right. I'm very concerned about all these Latinos that voted for Trump. I'm concerned about these Latinos who are, gun-ho on carrying guns. I'm very concerned about people not understanding how their voting rights are being, affected by legislation. I'm very concerned about our climate and earth beyond just the United States, what's happening to indigenous people beyond, us. So I look towards what, how do I place myself in that context? And I encourage students to do that, to go out of your comfort zone, to read beyond just read Leonard Pitts, for example. He's a journalist, he's a Black journalist, but he has a lot of interesting things to say about the moment we live in. And so, but I also want to encourage you to read one of my favorite poems, which is written by Jose Montoya. It's La Jefita. And the reason that I love that poem is because it reflects who he is, the son of migrant workers. And he's talking about his mother getting up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and having to make the tortillas. And so he can hear her, making the tortillas and packing lunches, because by 6 o'clock, they had to be out in the fields. And I think that when you keep that kind of feeling in you, you're always going to be concerned about working people and about the struggle for the rights of working people.
Thank you, Ms. Baeza. Before we head off to our Q&A section, we would like to show you a video done by our fellow amazing Grito member, Jesse Jimenez. So we will show you his video, and he has a few questions, so you'll get to hear him ask that. And also, just an FYI, for those that want to ask Ms. Baeza a question, you all can type those in the Q&A section. Or if you would like to ask her a question live, you can raise your hand, and then we'll move you to the panelists, and then you can ask her yourself your question. Thank you.
Saludos a todos. I hope you're all having a powerful day. Yo soy Jesse Jimenez. I am a first-generation estadounidense. And as of this past summer, I am also a first-generation college graduate. Shout out to all my profs in the CLS department. I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for your contributions to the movement and making the time to be here with us today. We appreciate you. As I completed my undergrad, I wrote a paper that centered the generational positionalities of gente during the movement. I chose to write about this because existing academic and cultural narratives about the movement portrayed folks of having generational lineage within the US, meaning they were all second, third, or fourth generation US born Mexican Americans. That there was this monolith of positionality within the movement, or that comprises the movement. With the aid of your testimonial and that of your contemporaries, Victoria Castro, Gloria Arianes, and Oscar Martinez, I was able to uncover that this was not the case and had never really been the case. And that generational positionalities, whether you migrated to the US as a child with your family, whether you were the first in your family to be born within the US, or were born to US born parents as well, had existed then as much as it exists today. My question to you is, how do we remedy this overlooked and erased aspect from the movement moving forward? And a follow-up question, in the organized spaces you were in, were there ever discussions about immigration reform? And if there were, are there any parallels between the undocumented movement that we are seeing now? Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro, for that question. But I think you're asking how we can know better who's involved, who is part of our movement, who has made a difference. And I think by knowing what we're doing here, by compiling a series of biographies that can dispel certain myths, and I think that is very important. The other thing is to look at data. I think to look at demographic data and to see if there is a parallel with, this is off the top of my head, I hadn't thought about this really. What does census data say? What is the socio-economic situation of first, second, third generation Mexicanos? One interesting data, for example, is that among the Black community, the number of households that are home ownership is not as high as in some areas for Latinos. And I think and also if we look at the data for education and other things, then we can see how we are developing. And not how we are developing, but how far we have come along. That does not get into the question that you're asking about the difference in generations and their positions. But I think through very almost an anthropological approach to it might be a way of getting at that. Does that help you? Where are you? I don't see you. Where's the student that asked the question?
We had him pre-record a video because he's working at this moment. I believe he is here, but he is working right now.
Oh,
so hopefully it answers the question.
Well,
so we will now, sorry?
What I did want to say is that if he wants to pursue this, give him my email. And so that, I don't know if my response made any sense to him, but I would like to pursue it with him, because I think it's an important question.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. We will now start off with the Q&A section. I see Dr. Nin has her hand up, so I will be promoting Dr. Nin, and she'll be the first one to ask you a question, and then we can move on from there.
Swan, you should be able to ask your question now, and just turn on your screen and your mic if you're on.
Hello there.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your story. You know, I brought my whole class here And the class is called Learning to Learn. The students, about 25 of them are mostly freshmen coming to Cal State LA for the first time. So, and we in the class on Learning to Learn, we talk about getting out of our comfort zone to go out there and learn about the world. And our work this past week has been about field work. Because of the restrictions due to COVID, due to the pandemic, only 3 students in my class are on campus. The rest are all at home. We had this class via Zoom. So I really thanked Alejandro for the opportunity and for you to be on campus to help to inform the students and to share with them your story. So you exemplify actually and what is really important through your personal stories of your involvement from high school on and beyond, integrating both the things you have done personally and also the political, social, and cultural events in the nation. I think you set as a great example for all our students. So my comment is really thank you so much for being there. And I hope I'll give my students an assignment for today based on their presence here in Dr. Alejandro's class. And that is, what are we learning? You know, what is so important about your story? Besides the story itself, but it's also the methodology through which we get your story, meaning you are available on Zoom, students were asking questions, Dr. Alejandro's students, both undergraduate and graduate students, they were asking questions. And we came together in a way as a community to create knowledge, both the kind of things you have told us, because they were not written down. Maybe I've not read your work, but they were not written down. As you mentioned, many of these things were not available, right? But so this is, so what I'm going to say is I appreciate your presence. I appreciate Dr. Alejandro for creating the opportunity. And thank you for having my students come to your event.
Well, let me ask, I want to say thank you for inviting your class. One of the jobs that I had along my working career was promoting the Lao versus US decision. It was a court decision. It was brought forth by a community in San Francisco. The Lao decision made it imperative that school districts provide learning in the language, in the native language of the student. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lao decision, but the Lao decision was very important in getting many of the school districts to offer bilingual classes, whether they were in Filipino, Chinese, Korean, Spanish, Portuguese, which at the time was a good a group of in the Bay Area. So, you know, all of us in some way or another have made a contribution to learning and to the possibility of learning in our own original language and being able to read and write and speak it. So I want to thank you and your students for giving me this opportunity to talk to you about the Lao decision.
May I continue with this conversation with you? May I?
Of course.
Dr. Alejandro, is it okay if I engage in a conversation with your guest?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what we're here for, is to be able to talk directly to Maria. Thank you.
Yeah. So in anthropology, we always talk about learning from other cultures. We talk about learning as the language of another culture. So in this presentation, There was Spanish being spoken. I know very little Spanish, but I speak 4 other languages, but that's besides the point. And if students in my class who heard you mention words in Spanish and they didn't know, I want them to know that. Just sit there and listen respectfully. This is how we respect another culture. Because students have already learned the concept called ethnocentrism. We do not want to think that our language, our English, is more important than another language. So we respect the Spanish or any language that's being spoken in a public forum. So the Zoom session here is a public forum. And for students in my class who are Latino, Chicano, okay, the correct terms, if some of them do know Spanish, if they know Spanish, keep it. If they do not know, learn it. That's what I'll say. And whatever language they have, they should learn it and keep it, okay? May I share with you my language story?
Of
Okay.
course.
I've been in California for more than 50 years. The US, oh gosh, almost 50 years in the US. More than 50 years in the US, about 45 years in California. I'm an immigrant also. And I told my students the story and they laughed so hard in class, I could hear them almost, about my attempt at learning Spanish. So my children have given me a dictionary from Spanish to English, and I will carry it wherever I go. I've only taken 1 course in Spanish in high school. And one time we were driving along Valley Boulevard, and I kept seeing this word, MARISCO. And I read it very quickly. I saw it several times. I said, my gosh, Marie, this person is so enterprising. She has so many companies along Valley Boulevard. Finally, I look up the word. It's Marisco. So I on the tail, kind of the fun I have in learning Spanish. My daughter knows Spanish. She tutored Spanish in high school to make a living. And they call her the Latina. My grandkids are in Japan right now. The younger one has been going to Japanese daycare, and now she speaks Japanese. So I think it depends on where we go, right? We pick up languages, and given where we are, why not Spanish, right? The most popular language in Santa Ana, second language where people are learning the language, is Spanish. And also in the the Little Saigon community. So I mean, there's so many stories to tell about languages. So I shouldn't take up the time of other people, but I just want to share with you the Marisco story.
Well,
Let me just say one more thing. I love the other word in Spanish, crazy chicken.
Crazy chicken. Oh, gallina loca.
El pollo loco.
Pollo loco, pollo loco.
Oh God, I love it. I love it. So if politicians are trying to ban Spanish, because I've heard enough stories about how your generation, our generation, when they went to school, they were forced to wash their mouth out with soap if they spoke Spanish, or they have to put a penny in a jar for speaking Spanish. You know what? Language, the second language, the Spanish language will stay around here, whether we like it or not.
Well, thank you very much. But I think what you're pointing to, and which is a great thing, is that we need more tolerance and understanding of each other. But thank you very much for that. I appreciate your, very much appreciate your attempt to well, it's not an attempt, a desire to understand other languages. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Dr. Nin. Sorry, we have a few more questions, so we'll get to those. But thank you so much, Dr. Nin.
Thank you, everyone. I'm seeing that Andre Amante raised his hand. Would you like to ask your question live, Andre?
Andre Amante. André, ¿qué pasó?
That's okay. He may have either stepped out or jumped off. I don't see him. Karina has a question too. Karina Gutierrez. Karina, are you available to ask your question?
Sorry, I had to promote her to a panelist, but I believe Sam also has a question. So Sam, would you like to ask Ms. Baeza a question?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I have a question. You're probably the oldest in pretty much anyone in this room, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but just would you say that from the time you were born up until this point, America has made progress towards like equality or not? Just want your opinion.
I think that there, in some areas, there's been some progress towards equality. Perhaps in terms of education. Just look at Cal State LA. When I entered Cal State LA, there were 100, as I said, 100 identifiable Mexican Americans on campus. Can you tell me how many students of Mexican or Mexican descent, Mexican American, Chicanos are there today at Cal State LA? Yes, there has been some progress. I would say that our progress is not as full and as fast and quantifiable as we would like. The number of professionals in terms of lawyers, in terms of doctors, whereas when I entered graduate school at Stanford, I knew how many professors there were. There was one. Today, there are a critical mass of doctors who are professors in the universities and researchers. I think there are a number of people who have chosen to become entrepreneurs in a larger scheme than when I was in grammar or high school or college. There were few people who owned business, and they were small business. Today, we look at the number of chambers of commerce that exist all over the United States that have people who are entrepreneurs of different sizes. Yes, I think there has been some progress, but it's not enough to create equality, and I'll tell you why. We still have children who go to bed hungry. We still have people who are homeless. We still have children and adults who don't have medical care of any kind. We still have people who are stuck in a poverty level and are having a hard time getting out of that. And the structure that supports that is still there. We have not broken it. So while we have made some progress, we are still, I think we still need to do more. We still need to form alliances with other groups, with other organizations that, for in the case of health, everyone should have health. Health is a human right. Everyone should have it. We should form those alliances. We should lobby. We should demand it for health. That's what we should do. We should have better care of children. We should have daycare for every child. Every child by the time of 3 years old should be in a daycare situation because it's a socialization process. By the time they're 6, they should already be learning to read and write. Some of our children in our communities don't get to school until they're 6, so they're already behind. So we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do in terms of asking for equal rights for women and children. Now, as I said before, I'm very concerned about how can we as Chicanos, Mexicanos, Mexican Americans, Americans of Mexican descent, Latinos, and all, how can we improve? What do we do in order to, we have to organize. We have to organize in our own communities and with other communities. We need to do that. Now, how is it done? It's different for every community because every community has different needs and every community has different resources they can call up. They have lawyers, they have educators, they have doctors, they have parents who care and another instance that I feel that we are not doing any progress is in the terms of incarceration and police brutality. I think that leaves a lot to be done. There is a real need to look at incarceration, and for those people that have been incarcerated just because of a small offense and they lose their voting rights, that should not be. So there's a lot to do. There's a lot that remains to be done. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, it does. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you for asking that question.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. We'll be moving on to our last question. So Karina, are you ready to ask your question? Karina Gutierrez, are you ready to ask your question? Okay.
It sounds like she doesn't have a mic, so she says she doesn't have a specific question.
Okay. Should we move on? Christina, are you ready?
Yes, we had actually one more question in the Q&A box. Paul Brunet asked if Maria Baeza could talk about the main challenges she faced during her college years.
The main challenge I faced was economic. I had to help my parents. My parents could not help me in any way. So I had to work and study, and that was very difficult. I remember one time I needed to get home from Whittier and Atlantic. I had gotten down to Whittier and Atlantic. At that time, I didn't have my old car. So that was when I was at East LA. So I didn't have enough money to get on the bus. So I had to ask people who were going to take the bus with me if they could help me with the bus fare. While it was very hard to do, people did help me to get on the bus. And because I went from there to Pico Rivera, and I mean, I did not, things were difficult for me along that line. And because I had to work, I never felt that I was really, really prepared, had the time to study and to devote to my studies as I should have. And so when I got to Stanford, the first quarter that I was there was difficult for me because I had a fellowship, and all I wanted to do was spend time in the library reading books that I had heard about but never had read. And so I almost flunked out the first quarter because I was so impressed with their library resources. I did attend class though, but eventually, of course, as you know, I stayed at Stanford for a while, became a dean there, and also assistant to the president for Chicano affairs. So I was able to overcome the economic situation, but it took a long time. But thank you for asking that.
Before we close, we would like to present Ms. Baeza with our Grito Award. We want to honor Ms. Baeza in sincere appreciation for her education and dedication to the Chicana O movement. On behalf of the Grito series, we would like to thank you.
Thank you so much. In preparing for today, I had read some of the old stuff I had written on women and other stuff, and I will make it available. I spent some time in Brazil, and some of my writings are in Portuguese, so I'll have to translate them before I send them off to you. But thank you very much for the award. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I so admire you students so much. I think you guys are the next wave of people that will get things done. And I'm so proud of you.
Thank you so much. We will get this delivered to you. So don't worry, you will get this. Is there any last words before we close off that you would like to say?
I think that Chicanas, Mexicanas, Latinas have come a long way, have blossomed into the incredible human beings that we all are. That, whether our field is literature, music, just listen to the poem that was introduced at the beginning. I loved it. I think that women as sociologists, as historians, as doctors, as lawyers, as business women, as engineers have so much to offer, so much to do on our behalf. And so I'm so this is a different world. This isn't the world that I had at Cal State LA. There weren't that many of us women. And you guys have each other. How wonderful. You are so lucky.
Thank you so much for those words. Folks, that will conclude today's episode. First and foremost, we want to give a special thank you to Ms. Baeza today for sharing her experience. along with her powerful wisdom and knowledge. Ms. Baeza, on behalf of the Chicana O Studies Department at Cal State LA and the guests watching, we want to thank you for your inspirational words. Thank you. We want to extend our gratitude to all the virtual guests joining us today on this very special occasion. We'd like to remind everyone that this is an ongoing series of multiple episodes. Please follow us on our Instagram at Grito_series, where we will keep everyone updated on future events. Also, if anyone would like to send a special message or a letter to Ms. Baeza, please send it to our email, gritoseries@gmail.com, and we will ensure that Ms. Baeza receives your letter. Gracias.
Gracias y hasta luego. Que les vaya bien.
Thank you.
Hasta luego.
And Ms. Baeza, can you stay a few minutes after, please? Hi, Frida.
Say hi.
Hi.
We have Frida and Luna here today as well, joining us. Say-
Ay,
Hi.
qué lindas.
Gracias.
Hola.
Gracias.
¿Cuál es Frida? ¿Cuál es Frida? A ver, Frida.
Y yo.
Me.
Ay, qué linda. Muy
¿Quién es?
linda, preciosa.
Y yo soy Luna. She's very shy. Yeah, but thank you, Mrs. Baeza. We just wanted to say again, like Dalia said, you know, you're an inspiration, and it's because of leaders like you that we're here today. But I have your award here. That's what we wanted to talk to you about, so that we can go ahead and, okay, you can go ahead. That we have an award for her. An award. You can tell her. Go ahead.
Hola, hola, Frida. ¿Cómo estás? How are you? Good, good. So, isn't that a beautiful plaque?
You want to put it closer so she can see it?
Wow, thank you. Wow. Oh, I love it. I love it.
See?
Thank you. Oh, el grito. Oh, I love.
She
Oh,
loves
beautiful.
it. But yes,
Gracias.
we wanted to present you with this, and well, yeah, like Dalia said, we'll go ahead and get it to you very soon.
I wanted to tell you how impressed I am that you're a full-time mother with 2 children. You're still in school. I mean, I don't know that I could do that. So
Yeah,
I'm really impressed.
thank you. It's really hard, but you know, tenemos que hacerlo de una manera u otra, because I want to be able to teach them as well to follow their dreams, right? Yeah, I was working a job that I didn't like, and my husband and I are actually both attending Cal State LA right now.
Great. What an incredible gift to the children.
Thank you.
There was a question that I didn't get to, and it was David's question, so I'll ask you now, and it's recording, and he's on right now, so he should be able to hear. He mentioned to us that on the Cal State LA archives, there isn't any yearbooks between the years 68 and 75. So he's saying that they're missing. Why do you think that those years are missing?
What are the years? 68?
68 through 75.
I don't know, but you know who might know is Carlos Muñoz. I would follow up with Carlos Muñoz on that question. Yes, I would follow up with him because I think that he might be closer. Also with Monte Perez. Monte Perez came back to Cal State LA in 69. Excuse me. He came back in 69 and he also was head of the Equal Opportunity Program at the time. So he also may know. Yes.
The woman needs to turn you off.
Oh, what woman?
Well, the service person.
Oh, we had a storm yesterday, and our a cable went off. So I'm gonna have to leave you. But I want to encourage you to please, follow up with me if there's anything else that you would like. And I will do that with you. I have a very interesting article from 1975 on immigration there. So I have some resources that you may not have. I don't have many, but so I'm going to have to go because the cable person has to use the.
Thank you so much, Maria. We will see you soon, and we love you for everything you've done. Have good luck with the service person.
And we love you, all of you, for everything that you do.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, folks, I'm gonna jump off. I think once we leave, it'll stop recording. You all did a wonderful job. That was pretty cool to see. I love all the images. Oh man, this is gonna be a really good one.
Good job, Dalia, Erandi, and Profe too. That was awesome. Like you bringing in the articles and everything that you had. That was really good.
Yeah, that was good.
Mhm.
Well, that's good. I had more, but I didn't know if I should jump in. I was like, so.
That was really good. I thought that was good to like put along with what she was saying. But
Right.
woo-hoo, our 4th episode, and we had a lot of.
Ben.
It was 83 at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it got high, right? That's the biggest we've had. So we're gonna keep pushing it, and hopefully we'll keep growing it. I upgraded Diana to a panelist, so she could be on here too. And Jesse and Jesse, David, I told them, but they denied it because they were both at work. So.
Yeah, and I think I upgraded Victor too.
Yeah, and I don't think he could do it either, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
I mean,
I'm here.
Yeah, he's
It's just
here.
I have some coworkers talking too loud, so No, I'm just
Oh,
kidding.
good to see
But
you.
yeah, it was really good. It was smooth, smooth, and she had a lot to say, which was like really enjoyable listening to it. But yeah, good job.
I'm glad a couple of other professors were on it too. I saw Sandy, Prof. Sandy on there, and then of course Swan was on there, and so that was kind of cool that they joined, and hopefully we'll share it with their classes in the future.
Well, we'll see you guys then, and I guess we'll plan a meeting so that we can talk about this meeting and then our next one. I'm going to start calling Paola Crisostomo right now to see if she'll answer.
Okay, great. I'll call her too right now.
Okay, all right. Thank you. All right, bye.
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 Bye,
Take
Frida.
care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.